College of West Virginia,
College of West Virginia. That later morphed into a,
Mountain State University,
and it's now,
West Virginia Tech.
okay, all same place,
Yes.
different name. Now tell us a little bit about your role as a physician's assistant. What's a physician's assistant do?
So a physician's assistant is, a layman term was a mid-level practitioner. Now we're called advanced practitioners, and we do everything a physician does except for, we prescribe medicines, we see patients, we assist in surgery, do small procedures, basically anything that the physician does. We're trained on the physician module.
What was your first job as a physician's assistant?
I worked in pediatrics
Where?
at Begley Pediatrics. I worked for 5 years there.
Where did you go then?
MedExpress.
And now you're currently employed where?
Reno Medical Center.
Are those the three professional positions you have held as a physician's assistant?
Mainly the ER and MedExpress for many years. At Princeton ER, MedExpress at the same time. I did a dual job. I worked in ENT for 4 years, and then he closed his practice to go to Virginia, and I could not go with him, so I went to Reno Medical Center.
You're familiar with the Cochran family?
Yes.
Did you meet them through a professional, your physician's assistant position, or some other way?
No, through youth league football. Our son played.
Did you know Michael Cochran?
Yes.
And you know Natalie Cochran?
Yes.
Could you be a little more detail? How did you get to know them? You said through football, but what kind of relationship did you have with Mr. and Mrs. Cochran?
So I met them through football. Michael was one of Hunter's coaches for a while.
And who's Hunter?
Hunter is our son.
Okay.
And Michael was always very nice, cordial, speaking. Natalie was a little standoffish. There was a lot of things going on in the youth football, a lot of problems and conflict.
Judge, I'm going to object to this type of testimony. There's the comment on the defendant's character and the vague testimony about some problems that we do not know anything about.
Your Honor, could I respond to that?
Certainly.
You didn't mention anything about this was somehow the defendant's fault.
No,
You said
I
there was
did not. I just said there was
conflict.
conflict in the youth football program in general.
The objection's overruled. Continue, please, Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. Do you have a time frame as to when Hunter and Mr. Cochran were involved in youth football, and that's how you got to know the Cochrans? What?
Hunter started playing in 2015. I think Michael was his coach around, 2015, 2016 is when we got to know Michael a little bit.
So it's been a fairly long-standing relationship with the Cochran
Right.
family. How did you generally communicate with the defendant?
Through text.
Was that the primary means?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I ask that this binder be marked as states.
All right.
Defense counsel has been shown a copy of the exhibit.
Very well.
And I'd like to hand this to the witness for review.
Certainly.
Stephanie, I hand you what's been marked for identification as states 3. Ask you to just briefly thumb through it for the purpose of saying what it is.
It's text messages between me and Natalie Cochran.
How do you know you were texting Natalie Cochran?
Because in my text, these are my text messages, but it's Natalie, it's the contact, she's speaking about Michael, we're speaking about money.
Okay. So you're confident that these are, in fact, are these screenshots from your phone?
Yes.
I'd ask that states 3 be admitted.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Stage 3 is admitted into evidence.
Ask you to take a look at one of the items that came from states 3. I call your attention to information that came to you from the defendant concerning her health. Is that the way you remember it?
Mm-hmm.
So the defendant advised you that she'd been diagnosed with cancer, and that was in January of 2019, correct?
Yes.
Also from States 3, I ask you to take a look at this. And this one may require some explaining. It should show up on that monitor.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Save you bending around. Take a moment to just review that.
Your Honor, could we have a date? It has time stamps, but we have no idea when this was occurring.
That's fair. Leave it January. Back up. Tell us when that conversation took place.
That one should have been in February,
The 4th, maybe?
the 4th.
So we're talking about February the 4th, 2019.
Yes, sir.
It gets a little bit confusing because at the top of this document, it's got a January 1, but that's when the screenshot was taken as opposed to the actual conversation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, when the defendant is telling you I can administer that, what's she talking about?
She had texted me and told me that she had had pneumonia. And she was still coughing really bad. And she wanted to know if she could get some steroids. She asked me if I told her that was fine. I usually do pills. She asked for a shot. So I was going to give her that, send it in for her to the pharmacy, and I asked her if she wanted me to come by and give it to her. She said no, that she could administer it.
And what did you prescribe for her pneumonia?
Solumedrol.
Generally speaking, what is that?
That is a steroid.
And that's the medication you offered to in pill form, but she wanted an injectable.
Prednisone pill form, but she wanted an injection. She asked for Solumedrol.
Okay. And an injection, is there any way to use the item you prescribed, the specific item, without needles?
No.
Try attention to the next item. The defendant's telling you about the morning of February 6th. from a physician's assistant's perspective, is there any significance to 103 degrees?
Oh, you're pretty sick, probably.
Okay. It seems like such a stupid question, but I got to ask it anyhow. How would anybody determine their precise temperature to 103 degrees?
By taking it with a thermometer.
Essentially not. But this, that's a first time indicator on it. Telling you that Mr. Cochran is sick too, correct? Just a moment. Do you recall getting a request from JD, your husband, to come to the Cochran home?
Yes, I do.
About what time was that?
About he had came and told me that Natalie had texted him and said she needed help, and he was going to her house. So he left, and 30 minutes later, I want to say 12:30-ish, he called me and told me that Mike was sick and that he needed me to stop by the house. And I said, you know, for what? And he said, because I cannot get her to take him to the hospital. And I'm hoping that if you come here that you can convince her to take him to the hospital.
Did you go to the Cochran house?
I did. I was headed to a meeting at the Board of Education, so I said I would stop on my way. And I think I got there at like 1:11 is what my timestamp said.
When you got there, what did you see?
Michael was laying on the couch. John, one thing on the phone that John had asked me to do was to bring a thermometer, that Natalie didn't have one. So when I got there, he was laying on the couch sleeping. Michael was laying on the couch sleeping. She had the blood pressure cuff on his arm. There was numbers on it as if it had just been taken. She had the pulse ox on his finger, which monitors like oxygen rate and pulse rate. And that all looked normal. Nothing alarmed me when I saw the numbers. The only thing I had with me was the thermometer that they had asked me to bring, which was a ear scan. I walked over to him and
Walked over to Michael?
to Michael. He was laying on the couch, and went to take his temperature and told him, Michael, this is Stephanie, because I knew how Michael was. If he had just woke up and saw me standing there, he may punch me. So I said, Michael, it's Stephanie. Don't hit me. I'm going to take your temperature. And he turned his head towards me. I took his temperature. It was fine. And then he was laying on the couch. They had a recliner that kind of sat behind the couch. And I sat down in the recliner. So his head was behind. I was behind his head. He was in there. And talked to Natalie and John for a few minutes to see what had happened and what was going on.
What were you told had happened?
I was told that, I knew.
Unless it's Statement of the defendant, I object to hear.
Fair enough. Did the defendant tell you what happened? Did Natalie Cochran tell you what happened?
Yes.
What did she say?
She told me that they had been sick that morning, which she had said through text. She said he was throwing up and he had a seizure or something in the kitchen and fell on the floor.
Did anyone tell you that, well, did the defendant tell you he hit his head at all?
No. I asked her 3 times if he hit his head, and she said no.
Okay. When you were able to physically see Michael Cochran, could you see any evidence that he hit his head?
No.
Did you look for that?
I was sitting behind him. He was laying on the couch, and as we were talking and her explaining how it went, I was, looking at his. I didn't see any, scratches or bumps or any bleeding or anything from his head at all.
Did you talk back and forth with Michael Cochran that morning?
Not that, just at the house when I said I was going to take his temperature. That's all I said to him.
Did he say anything in response to
No,
that?
he turned his head to me.
Did you ever hear Michael Cochran say anything during the time you were there?
No,
Was he awake or asleep at the time?
sleep.
Total time, if you were estimating that you were in the house, would be what?
28 minutes.
28 minutes. Of the 28 minutes, during that period of time, Michael Cochran was on the couch.
Mhm.
The defendant was present.
Yes.
Was John there too?
Yes.
Jake, your husband?
Mhm.
Was anybody else there?
No.
Did you get a picture of Michael on the floor in the kitchen at any time, or did that just go to other people?
I did not get the picture by text.
Did you ever see that picture?
Yes.
When did you see it?
Natalie showed it to me at the house.
While you were there?
Mhm.
That's it? Who is that?
That's Michael.
After you left the house, what was the next contact you had with the defendant?
I had went to a meeting, and when I come out of the meeting, I texted her to check on things because when I left there, she said she was going to let him sleep it off.
Did you ever advise her not to have him checked by anyone?
Never.
What did you specifically advise her?
That he needed to be checked. She told me that he had a history of seizures, and he had stopped taking his medication. And I said, he has to be checked. I said, even people with the history of seizures, anytime they have one, they need to be checked. We never know which one's damaging. And she said she was going to let him check it off. I kept offering, I would go with her. We would go, we could bypass Raleigh General if that's not what they were wanting to do. We could go to Charleston. She said he wasn't happy at Charleston either. I mentioned Princeton. Nothing was good enough. I said, well, let's call Chris and see if he'll get, the airplane. I'm sure he'll fly him somewhere.
Chris, you're talking about
Chris Davis.
Did she accept any of those suggestions?
No, she said she was going to let him sleep it off.
So if you were quoted as the one that said, I'm going to let him sleep, I think you should let him sleep it off, you didn't say that.
Never.
That came from her, not
Yes.
you. Now, after you left, and other than text messages just to check on people, were you ever made aware that the defendant's sister was at her house?
Yes. She told me in text message her sister was there and they had changed his clothes.
Did Did you find out why it was necessary to change Michael's clothes?
She said they cleaned the urine off, so I assumed he had lost muscle control and wet himself.
What was the significance to that to you as a physician's assistant?
That he had lost muscle control, so he needed to be in the hospital.
Around that same time, the defendant reported some vital signs to you, correct?
Yes.
What's the significance of any of those?
I'm sorry, what?
What, from a physician's assistant perspective, what's the clinical significance of those numbers?
Those numbers are good except for his respirations are down. His blood pressure is a little up.
Anything to be particularly worried about?
Yeah, the respirations are low.
What about the blood glucose? Did you check the?
Never. I don't have one.
So if that number came from the defendant and not you,
Right.
did you ever check his blood glucose?
No, I don't have one.
And blood glucose is another word for what?
Blood sugar.
Maybe that same day you get another text from the defendant. From your perspective, what did she mean by that first line, just like the back?
He was in the hospital in November. He was sick. He had gotten sick. They went to Charleston, and she had told us that night that he was in Charleston that they thought he had a brain tumor. So at 10 o'clock that night, John and I left to go down there to be with her. He was out of it at the hospital, but he kept waking up, like combative. But they were giving him like benzodiazepines at the hospital to sedate him. So I took it. She was saying that he was sick like he was in the hospital.
From your perspective, was it the same on February 6th of 2019 as it had been in late fall of 2018?
Yes, and the fact that he was given medicine for sedation, it was different. I mean, they were sedating him at the hospital to try to calm him down so they could do the tests on him.
And of course, he woke up from that.
Yes.
Did he ever wake up from this one? You also heard from her later that day. I call your attention to the sorry came about 45 minutes ago. Take a look at that. "21. What does that mean to you?
No one should ever have a blood sugar of 21.
What's going to happen if they do?
They're in a coma. Probably near death.
Probably near death.
Objection as to reading.
Overruled. What was your reaction to that?
It was, that we are to that point. It was just hard to swallow.
I'm going to object it right now. First of all, we don't know what's the reaction to what. Second of all,
Okay.
Perhaps you can ask another question, Mr. Coon.
That's all right, you're right.
If you could speak up a little bit, I'm having trouble
Oh,
hearing.
I'm sorry. I beg your pardon.
The jury has sonic ears, probably, and they can hear you, but my old ears aren't working as well.
I relate, and I understand. Despite the imminent death of the defendant, or of the victim, Mr. Cochran, were you still making plans, or was the defendant trying to still make plans with you to do other stuff?
Are you asking while he was at the hospital or after?
At the hospital.
At the hospital, I don't remember that. We only communicated through text at the hospital because we weren't able to go and see him at the hospital.
Did your relationship with the defendant go on after Michael died?
Yes.
Tell us about that a little bit.
I mean, just
I object on the grounds of relevancy.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Adams.
we would meet for lunch. We tried to be supportive for her and the kids. Everybody reacts differently when they lose someone, so we just tried to be there for her and the kids.
So you didn't feel any animosity toward her at all?
No.
This came up yesterday, and I'll ask you about it today. Did you invest some money with the
We
defendant?
did.
Did you get it back?
No.
Just so we're clear here, were you ever the treating physician's assistant for Mr. Cochran?
No, sir.
Has your testimony been tainted by...
I'm going to object to this question. It's vouching the witness.
I think I have to sustain the objection.
Did the loss of the money to Mrs. Cochran cause you to change your testimony today?
No.
The same thing.
I'll allow that, I'll allow that.
No, it did not.
Glad you said that, because the defense kind of implied from time to time that could happen. Did you...
move to strike that comment, Judge?
Oh, we've given both sides some leeway in that. I'll deny the motion overruled.
Were you aware that the defendant's house was searched?
I was. She actually called me from her mother's phone that same day and told me that they were there and they were taking things.
Did you say anything else about the search?
Later, I went to her house because I felt like there were so many conflicting stories that I wanted her to look at me and tell me what was going on, the truth.
What'd you tell you?
She told me that they had taken everything from the house. I asked her what was going on. She said she didn't know. And she told me that they had taken everything. They had even taken insulin that she had in the refrigerator.
God, just a moment, please.
Sure.
questions of Ms. Hamilton.
Thank you. Cross-examination, Mr. Griffin.
Ms. Hamilton, you have a lot of medical experience, I take it. Can you buy Humalog over the counter?
No,
No?
you can buy Humulin over the counter, but
So-
not Humalog.
Okay. Can you buy any kind of medication, insulin, over the counter?
There is one insulin that you can buy over the counter, usually at Walmart.
Okay. So if we turn on the phone and see all kinds of products like that online, would I require a prescription for
Most of them.
most of
Yes.
them? Okay, just couldn't get them online without a prescription.
Right.
Right. Okay. Well, how much did you invest in Natalie and Mr. Cochran's business?
I think the total was somewhere between $15,000 and $17,000.
So you have $15,000 or $17,000 worth of disliking my client.
Yes, but I talked to her until the very end.
All right. All right. You're not particularly happy about losing money to her business, are you?
No, I'm not happy about it, but life goes on.
Life goes on. And somehow, between the time when you had this great friendship with my client and now, you don't like her anymore, do you? Yes or no, ma'am?
I don't dislike her.
Or you don't dislike
I
her?
always try to find the good
No,
in
no,
everyone.
ma'am, please, yes or no? You don't like her anymore, do you?
I don't like the actions that she did.
All right. All right. Now, let's start with Michael. Is it true, ma'am, that Michael, well, you've known them for years, right? That Michael went to the hospital on at least 3 prior occasions between December of 2017 and November 2018.
I only know of one time. That was November 2018.
Okay. All right. And during that time, do you know that he had a seizure-like activity?
Natalie told me that he had a seizure.
Do you have from any...
I do not know that for a fact, no.
Well, I didn't ask you that. Hold on, listen to my question, please. You don't
She
know...
did answer his question.
Yes, that's right.
I said, do you know from any independent sources?
No,
Okay.
her.
Ma'am, please. Yes or no will suffice.
What do you mean independent?
Do you
sources?
know from any sources, such as review of the documents?
No,
From
I
any-
didn't have his medical records.
All right. Is it true, ma'am, from the medical standpoint, that people who have seizure tend to urinate on themselves?
Yes, if they lose muscle control.
So the fact that Mr. Cochran may have urinated on himself if he had a seizure would not be abnormal.
No,
But, all right. A man of, how much did he weigh approximately? You know,
I don't know. Maybe 180. I don't know.
how tall was he?
Maybe 5'7", 5'8".
All right. How much Humalog would he have to be injected to cause an immediate collapse?
I'm not sure.
Well, let's say a vial. How much of that vial, a standard vial of Humalog, as you probably know as a physician's assistant, what that is, right?
Sir, everyone's different
Right.
and how their body reacts to it. I may take 2 units and bottom out but you may take one and bottom out.
Entire units, right?
No, 2 units is what we measure
A
the
little bit.
insulin by.
A little bit.
Not millimeters, it's units.
Okay. A vial may have 12 milliliters. How many milliliters would it take for somebody to collapse immediately?
I
Of
don't-
that weight?
I don't
That weight
know.
structure.
It's whatever his body can handle.
So you have no idea whether he was injected with any type of Humalog at all.
I do not know.
You don't know, ma'am, whether any type of insulin bottle or vial that may have been found in my client's house 4 months after February, that would be June, had anything to do with any type of injection of insulin into the alleged victim.
I do not know.
You have no idea. But you know that Michael was sick before, right?
The one time.
That one time. Well, did you know that seizure-like activity, that's a pretty serious condition, isn't it? If he has seizures. Yes?
Yes.
He also had urinary retention. That can be a pretty serious condition if he was diagnosed with that.
Okay.
Serious condition? Could be.
Not really.
No,
It's more
not
of an inconvenience than anything.
Inconvenience? If you cannot urinate and get toxic,
You can.
that can be very serious, man.
Right.
Right. Toxic effects of any type of medication, reaction to medication. Could that be serious?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. He was diagnosed at first with a brain mass. Now,
Yes.
that could be very serious, couldn't
Right.
it? Then it was changed to encephalopathy. Do I pronounce it correctly?
Yes.
What is that, ma'am?
That's infection or swelling of the brain.
So brain swelling. And that is a pretty serious diagnosis,
Yes.
isn't it? When he went to the hospital in November, he was also confused, right?
Right.
He was belligerent and fighting, right?
Yes. Well, I didn't see that part.
Okay.
I saw him sedated and he was.
Okay. But you knew from him and from anybody else for that matter that he hated being in hospitals.
He never told me that.
He never told you that. Okay.
Right.
Well, did you know from my client that Michael?
Yes,
Hated
she
to
said
be
it that day at the house, that's why she didn't want to take him to the hospital, as he would be mad.
Okay.
And I told her to blame me.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you one more thing about this Humalog. Humalog, if injected, takes about 15 minutes of delayed reaction, right?
Yes.
And then it reacts insulin reacts in the human body, right, after
Right.
about 15 minutes, and then it subsides, right?
Right.
So if I'm jabbed with the needle and somebody injects a couple of milliliters of this Humalog in me, I'm not gonna just not react, right? And the medication itself will not react in my body yet, right?
Right.
Right. So I will have about 15 minutes to call for help.
Right. That's
I-
if you knew you were injected. Right.
Well, if right, ma'am, would you agree with me that if somebody comes and injects you in a certain part of your body, or maybe somewhere else on your body, that you will know that you got injected, right?
Right.
Once you know you're injected, you have about 15 minutes or so to ask the person who injected you, what the heck did you do that for, right?
True.
Or what the heck is happening here, right? And maybe beat the daylight out of the person who injected you, right?
Right.
And then to call 911 doesn't take that long, and say, hey, I've been injected with something by my dear wife. I need help. Desperately. She won't tell me what it is. So he would have the time to react to that injection, wouldn't he?
Maybe.
Maybe. Right. And yet, we have no record whatsoever of this alleged victim calling anybody for any help or assistance. Correct?
Okay.
So we have no idea why he collapsed, do we?
No.
All right. Now, I'm going to ask you this. Mr. Cochran was, at one time, I'm sure you know, diagnosed with acute encephalopathy,
Okay.
the acute brain swelling. And he was prescribed a medication, and I'll try my best to pronounce it correctly. Lamotrigine. Did I say it right?
What is it?
Lamotrigine?
Okay.
Lamotrigine?
Okay.
That's a serious medication, isn't it? Very serious medication. And if you don't take it for your brain swelling, you may be dead pretty soon.
Right.
Do you know that Mr. Cochran refused to take that medication?
He did not tell me anything about that.
Huh? So do you know from anybody that he refused to take that medication?
From the defendant, yes.
No. Did you also know that he was prescribed a medication called Keppra? What is Keppra?
Keppra is a seizure medication.
Anticonvulsive medication.
Yes.
Treats epilepsy, treats seizures, can also treat hemorrhaging, right? Subdural hemorrhaging,
Sometimes, yes.
sometimes. Did you know that he refused to take that medication?
I did not.
The way you knew Mr. Cochran, he always appeared a model of health to you,
Yes.
didn't he? He was a man's man,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Pump.
Very fit, healthy.
Very fit, healthy, pumped iron, right?
Yes.
Wanted to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, wanted to be, Mr. Universe. True?
I don't know about that. I think he liked to be fit because he coached a lot of sports.
Did he ever express the desire to participate in any bodybuilding competitions?
No, sir.
No? Okay. For that, he was using a certain amount of steroids, wasn't he?
I did not know that.
You didn't know that he was using supplements?
Not from him.
It's just the defendant?
The defendant told me the day at the house when he got sick that he had been taking some kind of supplements from Mexico that she had found.
Okay.
Later, she sent me a link to those supplements.
Oh. And did you look at those supplements?
Yes, the link that she sent me, they were not from Mexico.
All right. Those supplements, quote unquote, some of them were not for human consumption, were they?
I only knew of one.
Which was what?
I don't remember the name of it, but she sent me a link.
Okay. And actually, did you know that Mr. Cochran used all kinds of links on his computer to purchase substances that may have been less than medically approved by our American standards.
No, I did not.
Okay? Did you know whether he was getting any shipments of any medication directly to his home?
Only what she had said that day.
Okay. Now, you were so well acquainted with the family that you ever, I'm sure you talked to the children about.
No.
No,
I did
you
not.
never talked to the children about the,
No.
about, oh, okay. Okay. Let me also ask this. When Michael went to the hospital in late October, did you know that he only stayed there one day in the hospital?
No.
Well, did you know that he had a similar, if not identical, episode of a seizure? He had an acute respiratory failure. Did you know that?
He was in the hospital in November. That was when we had went down there that night.
I
But
didn't
I
ask-
never knew the exact.
I didn't ask you that. I asked you whether you knew that he stayed in the hospital prior to that in October, at the end of October,
No.
with all the same symptoms that he had in November.
No, I only knew about the November one.
Well, what do you know about his mold exposure?
She told me later that they thought it was mold. That was like a month later. She told me they thought it was mold from a house that he was remodeling.
Huh? Did you have any mold in your house?
Do I?
Did you at that time?
No.
She said, you said that it was from the mold in your house?
No, a house
I'm sorry, I
he was
couldn't-
remodeling.
Okay, from the remodeling. Okay. Now, he also had a convulsive status epilepticus. That was one of the diagnoses, and maybe you will tell the jury what that is. Convulsive status epilepticus.
That he had seizure disorders with convulsions.
Epilepsy?
Epilepsy.
Acute respiratory failure, something that I'm seem to having right now. Anyway, what is acute respiratory failure?
It's when your lungs quit pumping out the capacity to breathe.
Okay,
So you go into stress.
but he also had altered altered mental status. Was he in distress at the time when he went to the hospital in November?
I did not see him in distress.
Well, did you see him a couple of days before February the 6th?
I think it was about a week before that I saw him.
Did he appear under any stress to you?
No.
He was just his usual,
Yes.
healthy, wonderful
Yes.
self.
Yes.
And yet he had all these conditions that were diagnosed at the time of his demise. Didn't he? Do you know?
I do not know that. I only knew about the seizure that she said that day, that he had seizure disorder.
Okay. And what's hypoxia?
It's when your oxygen's low.
Okay. What's hypercapnia?
Hyper what?
I think it's hypercapnia. Or maybe I'm mispronouncing it.
Hypercapnia.
Uh-huh.
It's when you kind of go into a metabolic state because your respiratory system's low.
And would it surprise you that was what was the final diagnosis
Because his breathing was down?
of his at the hospital? Would it surprise you?
No, because his respirations were down.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you this. When you now, the when you tested Michael when you went there? Approximately 1:30, something like that?
About 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Yes.
His pulse was normal. His saturation was normal. His blood pressure was slightly elevated. It was, what, 168 over 103, slightly elevated.
Sir, I did not check those. Those were what she had checked. I did not do any vitals except for temperature when I was there.
Okay. All right. Now, will the brain swelling cause any sugar reaction in your body?
So usually sugar, when your sugar drops, or you have an influx, too much insulin that the body secretes out, or you given, your brain will swell from that.
And of course, that's a mutual reaction. The brain swells and the sugar drops.
You got in a coma.
So he has an ongoing condition of a brain swelling, and you're surprised that his sugar went down?
Yes.
I see. All right. Okay. If I may have a second. Did you see any other individuals in the house of Natalie Cochran when Michael was already on the couch?
No, just Natalie and my husband were there.
Natalie and your husband, a police officer.
Yes.
What is his rank? Sergeant? Lieutenant?
Corporal.
Corporal, I'm sorry. And you were aware of the fact that there were two employees of TSG who moved Michael from the floor to the couch, right?
Yes, I did ask who moved him, and that's what they told me. But they were not there when
Well,
I
they
was
were
there.
not there. They're already left, right? And that at some point, Mr. Davis showed up, right?
Not while I was there.
And not you were there. From your medical knowledge, if Natalie Cochran left Michael unattended like this, in this condition on the floor, would he have expired?
Most likely, yes.
Most likely, yes. And yet this cold-blooded killer had all kinds of people in the house to monitor his condition. Is that right?
To monitor it,
Well, to do something.
I did not monitor his condition.
All right, well-
Came, looked at him, told her what to do, and I left. I was there 28 minutes, sir.
But I want to ask you this, ma'am. Whether the presence of any other people in that house negates the possibility that she would just leave him there alone to die. And nobody would know. Is that possible?
That's a question I don't think this witness can
No.
answer.
I think
I don't know who exactly was at the house. I only saw who I saw.
You testified on direct that Michael reacted to your suggestion to take his temperature, right?
He turned his head.
Turn his head. So he was still reacting.
Yes.
All right. Now, did you say something to the effect that there were some words like "don't punch me"?
Yes.
Who said that?
I said that because if he's asleep and he wakes up and I'm just standing over top of him and he startles, could be his first reaction.
Okay.
It would be anybody.
Okay. So the sum total of your testimony, ma'am, is that you have no idea what kind of substances were in Michael's body on February the 6th, right?
I do not know what was in his body on February 6th.
Well, did you find any syringe in?
No.
Or did you see any syringe in?
I did not see anything.
Okay.
I only stayed right there in that chair.
Okay. And you don't know what kind of medication Michael was on prior to?
I do not.
All right. And you don't know what medication he refused to take or didn't take?
The only thing she said was that he refused to take his seizure medicine they had given him.
Yes. Yes, yes. I may have a second.
Yes, you may.
Was there a glucose meter in the Cochran's residence?
I did not see one.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Redirect Mr. Truman.
Thank you. The defense asked you if it would be reasonable that someone injected would have a few minutes, like 15 minutes, to call 911. There's an underlying assumption, isn't there, that the victim was awake?
I'm going to object to the
Overruled.
prosecutor's meeting.
Go ahead. You may answer, please.
That Mr. Cochran was awake when he was injected. Wouldn't that be part of what the defense was asking you?
That's what I'm gathering.
So if Michael Cochran had been sedated or was not awake, he wouldn't necessarily follow the defense theory that he'd had 15 minutes to call 911, would he?
Right.
Judge, that calls for utter speculation.
Well, I'm going to have to overrule the objection, but I'll preserve your exception.
Also, the defense asked you about circumstances where a blood sugar level of 21 would cause brain swelling. And you agreed, correct?
Yes.
Does it work that way in reverse? Would a swollen brain cause blood sugar to drop to 21?
I would have to really research that, but I can't imagine why. It would be the opposite.
I'm going to object to that answer. Move to strike it. The witness doesn't know.
Overruled.
In fairness to the defendant, you don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. You also responded to a question concerning like or dislike of the defendant, and you stated that you didn't like her actions.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
Well, what she had done was, with the money.
Now, that is, I'm objection. That's comment on the defendant's character.
Lying?
I'm going to overrule the objection. You may continue.
So when you said lying, you felt that the defendant was being less than truthful with you. Was that just on one occasion?
Just several conflicting stories.
Okay, just a moment, please.
Yes.
You responded that you told the defendant to blame you. And what was that in reference
When I kept telling her he needed to go to the hospital, she said that he would be mad if he come to and was at the hospital. And he would be very upset because he didn't want to be at the hospital. So I told her to tell him that I had been there, and I said he had to go. Blame me, I didn't care if he talked to me again or not.
Why did you reach that?
Because I wanted him checked.
How important was that to you that he be checked?
It was important to me.
Did she do that?
No,
Or at least not until
she refused.
6 o'clock or 7 o'clock that night? That's all the questions the state has. Thank you.
Be crossed.
Conflicting stories, man.
What do you
have-
say?
You have a story that you go to the Cochran's home. Michael, who apparently dropped on the floor, is now on a couch.
Mm-hmm.
If there is nobody there, how you suspect that she just dragged him on the couch? Who took him to the couch?
I told you I knew that the contractors had put him on the couch.
Now, do you have any evidence that Michael was injected to begin with?
I do not.
Do not. But that he was injected with anything while he was asleep
I do not.
at 11:30 during the day. You don't have any evidence of that,
No.
do you? Now, let's be perfectly clear right now. You are there in her house with a law enforcement officer, your husband, with a man who is just about to die, according to you, or at least you want to check him out. You have a law enforcement officer who can enforce taking her to the hospital, can't he? He's a state trooper
No.
who sees a
no
person
one
to
can,
die.
No one can make someone go to the hospital. You cannot make a person go.
Okay. He is injected, and he is in this state of coma. And you are so concerned about the health of that person as a paramedic, or I'm sorry, as a physician assistant. Why don't you go step outside and call 911 yourself?
Because she refused. I can't make her do that.
You did not call 911. Your husband didn't call 911. You were convinced that from the medical standpoint, this man was in serious trouble, right?
I said he needed to be checked. He needed to go to the hospital, further testing. I didn't know what was going on with him.
Are you a mandatory reporter?
A medical reporter?
Mandatory reporter, that you have to report abuse or medical emergency, potential crime involving medical.
If it comes in and I suspect that, yes, and I have a chart and I know what's going on with them, yes.
Well, you suspected, you knew what was going on with him. And yet, as a who would you have to call as a mandatory reporter? The
It
hospitals?
depends.
The police?
It depends on what it is. CPS.
Well, CPS. Well, you had the police right there, your husband. You could have called the CPS, you could have called an ambulance as a mandatory reporter. Say, this man is dying. Take him to the hospital, have him checked out by a doctor. You didn't do any of that.
I told her to take him, sir. She was his voice. I can't make her go.
From the mandatory reporter standpoint, if that person is, or even purely medical, if that person is unconscious, isn't that a mandatory, or some kind of mandatory requirement that this person be taken to the hospital?
So he was sleeping when I was
Oh,
there.
he was sleeping.
And she said he had had seizures. People go to sleep after they have seizures, and that's what he looked like. He was in the post-ictal phase.
Okay. all of this, ma'am, has, as far as you know, nothing to do with any injection of an insulin.
I do not know that.
All right.
Anything further, Mr. Truman?
Not from the state, Your Honor, thank you.
May this witness be excused.
So far as the state's concerned, yes, sir.
Subject to recall, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Hamilton, you are subject to recall. That means that you cannot stay in the courtroom, nor can you watch anything about this case on TV or online.
Okay.
This means that you may be recalled later by the state or by the defense to testify.
Okay.
But you may step down.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our mid-morning break. At this time, we'll break